Welcome to the World United. Welcome to the World United.
I'm Mike, and it's good to meet you all. And we're going to get started here with session 3 of the program. The title of this section is Galactic Origins and Consciousness. And we have a really fun group today, so we're just going to jump right into it. And I apologize, I haven't got a whole lot of time to familiarize myself too much with you all, but our first guest this evening is Stephen. Excuse me, Stephen Strong, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry,
You know
I've just
what?
unmuted you.
I'm sorry, I have lost all my stuff here, and I wasn't supposed to do this section. So you're going to have to help me out, guys, all of you, and make me look good, because right now I'm looking pretty bad. So, Stephen, it's your chance to go first.
Well, actually, you're not looking too bad. The backdrop with the palm trees and the beach doesn't look too bad, mate. So you carry by the outside background scenery.
It looks really good.
Yeah. Look, what we were asked to talk about, what we did want to talk about was some skulls that were found in Australia. 4. Now, I went to a site, a burial site that was discovered by a farmer, made contact with the Australian government. Some people came out and had a look and said nothing to see here and closed the site up. And it's been shut for 2 years when the farmer just got fed up. Contacted some other people. I got contacted by them, never met the farmer until I got down there, spent 2 days down there. And we saw a skull there that doesn't exist anywhere on this planet. Now, I was lucky enough to see the skull in situ in the burial site as it was. I didn't dig. I only worked with what was there on the ground. If I dug, I wouldn't be talking now. I'd be in jail. I've got plenty of offers from that from the government. What we found with this skull was that unlike all other human skulls that we know of, there's nothing in common with it. Number one, in your case, Mike, you have what's called a forehead. I can see it right now. It's above your eyebrows and it goes up for about 6.5 centimeters. Well, I'm going to show you the bone that comes directly from one of these 4 here, and I'm going to hold it up now. And I'll hold it this way so you can see it sideways, and I'm not holding it myself. I've got a hanky on it, and I'm going to hold it in front. And you'll notice above the eyebrows, there's nothing. Doesn't exist. Now, we do know that we've done quite a lot of work with these skulls, and I can tell you now that the skull brain size there, the cranium size, is 1,800 cc's, and ours is 13. So it's at least 35% larger brain than what we've got. But 95% of the brain slopes backwards down, so that basically 95% of the brain is below the eyes. Now, in your case and in everyone else's case, about 90% of the brain is above or in line with the eyes. Now, what that does is that creates a completely different type of being. And there's a lot of reasons why. Number one, it runs backwards and flasks outwards. The widest point at the back is 17 centimeters. The widest point of ours in the middle is 13. We run back to about 16, it runs back to 19. So it is a massive case that sits below the eyes, but when you look face to face to it, you would think it's dumber than Lucy, which is about 3.4 million years old and supposed to be our ancestor. Well, this isn't. This is nothing like it. There are a variety of things that tell us a lot more about this being. Number one, on one of the ones, and the one I'm showing you now, there are no sutures. Now, that's a big issue because all hominids have 3 sutures. Lucy had 3 sutures and she was 600. We're 1,300, and that's because when a baby is born, the cranium is not fused together. There's give and take. And with all the monkeys, all the apes, and all the other things that are supposed to be closely aligned to us, they have a sagittal keel. So their brain will never increase in size. Now, one of these 2 we've seen has no sutures. Now, the interesting part is the one without sutures, and I want you to think about this being 17 centimeters high at widest at the back. It's like a flask that opens up at the back. I'd like to think about the problems any any female would have giving birth to this particular being unless it was cesarean. I don't think it's possible. We have some real issues. Number two, the eyes of this being, and I'm going to show you now a semi-completed skull. And here are 8 pieces given to us by a professor, and I'm going to hold this up now, and you'll get a feeling now for the shape of the skull. It's been joined back together. The gentleman who did this worked for the Australian Museum in skull reconstruction. So this wasn't done by a punter out in the streets. And you can see when you look, and I'll turn it around there, no forehead. And you can see how much this slopes backwards. What's interesting is the eyes of this are at least 46% bigger than ours. But the most amazing part of this being was when we went to the site itself, and I picked up what is called the humerus bone, which runs from here down to your elbow. Yours is about 30, so is mine, and a basketballer might be 32. The gibbons are 35. The one I picked up and put against there, and there were about 6 people who saw it, went down to 43, down to here, but I didn't have an elbow joint. So it had to be no less than 46 centimetres long. That is at least 15 centimetres long than any human on this planet. But what is fascinating is the bone was no longer or wider than 1 inch at its thickest point. So what I've got here is I've got a being with massive eyes. You couldn't take them out during the daytime. It's owl's eyes, only bigger. But I've got a being also that has an arm that really won't work. It will not work. It is too thin to be functional. So nature's making something that some people call a mutation. But by the way, we found 4 of these skulls in 4 different tribal locations. 1 is coastal, 2 are riverine, and 1 is desert. And they're separated by 2,000 kilometers. So it's not a mutation. This is a race. Now, my problem is, it's a race not made for here. But the bone, that arm, does not work. It couldn't work. You could basically carry something with it, but don't play tennis with that arm. It wouldn't work. But if you halve the gravity, then that would explain why the bones are thinner, because the gravity would mean that you've got the capacity now for that arm to work better. And if it was at a place where there was no sunlight, then the eyes work well. But as it's made now, we found a being that just doesn't fit. No sutures on one of them. And the most important part is, ladies and gentlemen, is that the whole makeup of this being, it was buried in a sacred burial site, and it was buried alongside others, and the front 2 teeth were taken out. And I noticed I had a look underneath there, and there's no remains. They were pulled out, which happens to be a sacred initiation ritual given to original people from that area. Up until Cook, they still did that ceremony. So we have a being that's been honoured. Now, the way it was buried, the arms and the knees were up against the chest, which is and was facing the east. So this being that was buried is an incredibly special person, or being, as the case may be. But it has so many characteristics that really don't fit. Now, what I'm going to show you next is I've shown you this reconstruction that was done by our friend from Australian Museum. Now, Evan, the gentleman who made the next one, he did the faces. For what films were they again?
The Alien and the Predator films.
Right.
So, yeah, he worked on that in his spare time.
Right, he did that. So he had some skill in reconstruction. So what he then did was he was given that. Now, he made one mistake with this being insofar as he gave it a bit of a forehead. It doesn't have one, but that's understandable because all the other ones he did, didn't he? So I sort of, he got a bit carried away with that. But I'm going to hold it up to you now. This is the being that he created. Now, I want you to look at that being and look at the size of the eyes and look at the size of the nose. Now, I'm going to hold up alongside it a Homo sapien to give you an idea of the differences. Now, you'll notice number 1. Oh, thank you, Evan. The nose is completely different. The mouth is wider. The eyes are much wider, and the nose starts roughly between the eyes. And by the way, on the top there, this one has a depression between the eyebrows. This one, the one we're talking about, if you look very carefully, it doesn't have a depression. That's the highest point. So what we have, and I'm going to make this quick because I know we've only got 15 minutes. What we have here, ladies and gentlemen, is a being that doesn't have sutures. It doesn't have the same eyes as us. It doesn't have the same mouth as us. It doesn't have the same cheekbones as us. Its bones are completely arranged in a different way. The neck would be completely different to ours. And we also know, looking at one humerus bone, and by the way, if you do a measurement, and by the way, I also picked up the femur bone and put it alongside mine, and it was identical. And I originally thought this being is going to be 5'10". Then when I picked up this last piece, according to a scale we found from Japanese scientists, it would make this being 8'10". So we've got a difference of 3 feet between the legs and the arms. So I want to give this some context before I'm finished, because this is just a very brief introduction to one part of original history. You need to understand something. There's only one dreaming story in Australia that goes to all 500 tribes, because our dreaming stories are region specific. The only story that goes everywhere is the 7 sisters from the Pleiades. I have been told by all of my elders that in Australia, only the Pleiadians were allowed in here. There was an agreement that took place before any other settlement. And we know this one belongs to that, because I'm going to close with a story. When we were driving towards this professor that had also taken these bones to the government, and the government said nothing to see there, and that's why he contacted us and gave it to us, I got a phone call from one of my elders, Wirrichan, from South Australia. And we're about 10 minutes out, weren't we, Evan?
Yeah, 10 to 15 minutes out.
Now,
Yeah.
and we'd never met this guy before. And he said to me, "You're going on today to see someone with bones, aren't you?" And I said, "Well, yes, Wirrichan, but we never mentioned that to you."
Nobody knew that other than people.
No,
in the
but we
car.
kept this quiet. Really, it's a big issue. We're in a lot of trouble with the government here. We don't give this sort of stuff away. I said, "How did you know that?" He said, "Don't worry about that, but I have 2 messages to give to you from the spirits. This is original old way messages, and we take these in." He said, "The 2 things I wish to tell you is, number 1, the skull you're going to see, which we didn't know he knew about, and he didn't, the spirits told him that, is the son of Byami." Now, for original people, our creator God is called Byami, and he brought with him 3 sons. Well, the story is that this is supposed to be one of them. Now, for the skeptic amongst us, we could say, prove it. How can you prove that is the son of an alien called Byami who came here across the Milky Way so long ago? How can you prove it? Well, he gave me a second piece of information, ladies and gentlemen. And this for me was given simply to prove, because I doubted that straight away. I thought, well, how can you prove that, Wirrichan? That's an easy one. He then told me this. He said, "The skull you're going to find today," he said, "I can tell you where it came from." I thought, oh, this will be interesting.
Yeah. Well,
Because I don't know, and I know it was found in Australia, which is a big place.
yes, that's all.
He said it comes from the Wimmera region, which is a small plains area, dry plains area in a little part of Victoria. I thought, well, that's going to be interesting. And then he hung up. And then we drove to the door, and we met at the door with the gentleman, the professor, who had been to the government, told him there was nothing to see there. He was holding up that piece of bone I showed you, and he said to me, and the words were exactly this: "We found this in the Wimmera region." I want you to think about that for a sec, ladies and gentlemen. Number 1, he did not know we were going to see anyone. Number 2, he was never told that we were going to see a skull. And number 3, we never told him where it came from because we didn't know.
Yeah.
But he did. And my take is this: it came from the Wimmera region, which is true because I met the guy that found it there. And secondly, most importantly, it is one of the sons of Byami, which means from my point of view and from every original point of view, this skull does not come from here. It's lived here and it was buried here and given ceremony here, but its ancestry, and it may have human within it, but it also has Pleiadian. And I can tell you in closing, because I know we only have 15 minutes and I want to try and keep to that schedule, that since we found this, I have received 3 formal letters from the government threatening to put me in jail over these skulls. I have been threatened continually. I've been told we're going to go to jail for 3. Originally, it was 6 months or 3 years, $250,000 or $750,000 fine. at the end, when I got my fourth one, and it's like pages and pages, you've got to answer 42 questions. They scrabbled out and or, it was both. So I was getting the full lot then. And then finally, I got late last year, I got a letter of warning from the government saying this, that they had more than enough evidence to put me in jail. But at this moment in time, they're not going to do it. But then they reminded me at any time in the future they see fit, they could resume proceedings and definitely put me in jail. Now, the reason they're doing this is we did approach a university, the best in Australia, and the professor looked at it and said, my God, I don't know what this is, but I can tell you what it's not. It's not a Homo sapien. Well, the history of Australia is Homo sapiens from Africa coming here 50,000 years ago. And I knew that because he'd written that paper. And I said, didn't you write a paper on this? He said, yeah, but that paper's now wrong. Now, the government knows that. And by the way, at the moment, they have put me on 2 legal gags with the skulls. Yes, there's a university wants to examine it. And when they do, they will find mitochondrial DNA that doesn't exist anywhere else on this planet. But at the moment, this is the situation. If I take these bones to any person to test them, I will be immediately arrested and put in jail. Secondly, if I take the bones out the front door to show anyone, by the way, we're inside the front door, so I could show you that. You're the only people who get to see it because we can't take it out of here. I will also be arrested. So at the moment, what they've done is they've seen the skull and they've seen what we've made, and they know if we went to a court and they held that up, they'd lose. So what they're doing is they've got me in a hold situation. So the sum of this all is one thing. Those people who don't believe in aliens, well, we don't talk about the spaceship. We got them. And the government knows we've got them. And one day when the mitochondrial DNA is tested, that will be the ultimate proof. They live with us a long period of time and they will be coming back. And I'll leave it at that because we've got 15 minutes and we've done 17. Thank you, Mike.
Wow, thank you. That was incredible. That's very, very interesting. Hopefully we'll get to talk a little bit more about that in the panel discussion at the end.